Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Hager keying system, their Hager keyway key system that you can be a locksmith and know all kinds of things for many years and be very successful, but the Hager system is rather unique and certainly threw me for a bit of confusion initially. Their system is really cool, is the bottom line. And the gentleman at Hager, who I believe was a part of designing the system to begin with, is incredibly helpful and responsive to assisting. So really where the confusion lies is when you look at their key. This is an H1 keyway, and we're going to get into their multiplex system in a moment. Doesn't that to you look like small format interchangeable core? It sure does to me. But then if you study it, got an undercut, you've got what might be a tip stop, you've got a shoulder stop there as well, though, and that's interesting. You've got an H1 on the key blank. An H1, I think, is the only keyway that I've seen, and because this system was only introduced in 2014, is maybe why I've not seen the other keyways in their multiplex system. So, first of all, where's the confusion lie? Well, the confusion lies in that I automatically think it's small format, as do other people. I've had people call me up and say, no, it has to be 6-pin. Okay, that's probably not a problem. And then you contact Hager and you find out, well, they're 7-pin blanks. But they can go anywhere. They can go in any cylinder. A Hager cylinder, that is. And that's further confusing. Well, after some discussion with the factory, it all actually becomes quite clear what the bottom line here is happening. First of all, the tagline of the Hager system is that they permit in their internal Hager keying structure, their cylinder structure, the ability to use a single key to go into conventional and interchangeable core formats. Hager will tell you, we believe it's very convenient because you might have some cylinders that you need to have really rapid removal from. That might be exterior doors on a school, whereas the rest of the locks can be conventional core. So you might do interchangeable core on those outside doors that you want to be able to turn over really fast. But then forego what is additional cost in the long term of interchangeable core everywhere in the system. So you can use a single key to work both interchangeable core and conventional core. So that was new to me when I had heard it. The next thing is that it does look indeed like a small format. That apparently is coincidence only. This is a shoulder stop system, is the bottom line. The next thing that's really neat is that these are all 7-pin blanks. And allow me to say this, and Hager says it, and their keying service manual, which is linked below this video, they say it on page 6. Here's the bottom line. Hager has one type of key, an ordinary 7-pin key that fits all locks. So my training is like, wow, how do they do that? Those are awfully long cylinders everywhere across the board. Well, the key manager at Hager basically told me which I then realized, oh, that's the only way that can work, is that they simply close up the spacing between each of the cuts. The shoulder to the first cut, then the center to center of each cut is specific to a Hager 7-pin system. The advantage of a 7-pin system naturally is you're going to be able to get you're going to be able to get a lot more potential key changes out of the system. Okay, and that's really handy for a variety of reasons. Not only because of the ultimate expansion of a system, the amount of theoretical masters, top-level masters, block masters, row masters, column masters, page masters. The ability to create changes is greater significantly because that addition of the seventh column, the seventh chamber in the system. There are then reasons from a locksmithing perspective that would be advantageous because you've got the additional cylinder chamber. You can do possibly either with the factory or do it after receiving the cylinders. Create yourself construction keying, create yourself key capture, create yourself Brinks functions, a Brinks function on your cylinder. So they would certainly argue that having that seventh chamber is advantageous, and it will sure give you a lot more system. They have a maximum adjacent cut specification of 8. And that's really amazing because that's going to give you lots of changes available. The factory may go to 9 on a max. So when you are calculating your possible change, so what I'm driving at is if you have a 7-pin chamber with a max of 8, and you have a 10 depth system, which Hager does, their 0.0125 increment. They've got it all tight. You've got to have well machined, well manufactured cylinders. If you've got 10 root depths and you've got a max of 8, basically you're dealing with even parity. Well, no, you'd have to do odd parity. You'd have to do even parity with that. Forgive me. 10 root depths, a max of 8. That's not really going to put you into trouble at all, for the most part. You can possibly generate 4 for sure, plus the master changes per depth, right? Yeah, you can change. You can create 4 changes plus the master per chamber times 7. So, the quantity of changes is going to be 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. 5 to the 7th, 78,000 changes. So that's a huge number because of the way that they've created the system physically. I don't see any problem with that math. So they've jammed everything together. Now, the downside of all of that is you're not going to use your regular pin kit because the pin diameters are smaller naturally. So let's jump into that keying manual and let's take a look at it right basically from the beginning so that we can get an idea of what the system is overall. Hager's going to talk about their intro to the cylinders, about their multiplex system, the cylinder products and keying configurations, the types of keys and what they can do regarding keys, depths and spacing, and then service equipment, kits, tools, things of that nature, cylinder maintenance. Let's jump into page 2, the preface. The bottom paragraph, pin tumbler cylinders are a mature locking technology. In fact, it was Linus Yale who invented it, patented it, I should say, in 1878, perhaps. Don't quote me on the date, but it's there in that range. Cylinders can be defeated by drilling, picking, wrapping, impressioning, and many other techniques. Master keyed cylinders are less secure than cylinders supplied in non-master keyed configurations. That's because the quantity of incidental keys that will work a master pin cylinder creates many incidental shear lines, which is the logic for a duplex type of lock, which means there were actually 2 key cylinders in it, because you can separate your master key changes from your change key changes, reducing the incidental change keys, incidental share lines. Master key cylinders are less secure than cylinders supplied in non-master key configurations, and it is impossible to guarantee that any specific key will not operate a specific lock. What they're saying in that regard is if you had a cylinder with 3 changes, and I just made up these biddings, okay, Grandmaster, Master, Change Key, okay, what they're saying is it is impossible to guarantee that any specific key will not operate a lock. So when you look at this, if I pin this so that only the Master or Grandmaster, only the Master, only the change work, well, that's going to be fine, but the bottom line is any key cut to 1, 5, 1, 8, 3, 1, 7 is going to work. You see my point? That bidding I just called off by using biddings from those 3 key numbers is going to work the cylinder. So the amount of incidental keys is quite huge, and that's what Hager is saying, that they can't guarantee any key's not going to work the lock. I've pinned that cylinder for 3 keys, but theoretically, many keys will work. I mean, 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, 3 to the 7th power is the theoretical combination of keys that are going to work that lock, right? (2,187 possible keys). So, you know, and this point really illustrates quite well why there would be a duplex system where you have, I'm not aware of any modern locks that use it, but padlocks certainly did, and you can look up duplex lock cylinder or padlock, that would be easy. If you take the master into 1 cylinder, the master biddings, and put it only into 1 cylinder, and then you keep your change keys on a different cylinder altogether, where either will actually operate, you significantly, you just hugely reduce the potential for incidental changes that will operate that cylinder. Okay, so pin tumbler cylinders are simple, reliable, and provide a level of security that meets the needs of most facilities. Hager reps can assist in specifying the correct product for your needs. Going on to page 3, that's the multiplex system, and we'll talk about the multiplex system here now. In 2014, Hager has a gradual phase in to replace older keyways. I would say older keyways, not Hager's, that are not patent protected or restricted at all, the ubiquitous Quicksets and Schlage C's of the world. All cylinders using the Hager H series are 7-pin, including cylinders designed to fit traditional 6-pin products. That goes back to how the spacing got closer, and we'll talk more about that. So that tree that you see there with the H1, the H2, and the H3 at the bottom, with an H12 and an H23, with an H123 at the very top. H1 is stocked and supported in Hager's Quick Ship program. Other keyways are available by special order only. Contact your Hager factory representative. Okay, so they probably have not been bringing in H2 and H3 cylinders and keys along with the multi-section keys above there because, you know, at the time of this video, that system's theoretically only 4 years old, so not very old for a keying system. But the multiplex system that's drawn there would permit you to be able to be more flexible with the key system. And significantly so, building on top of the 7-pin logic. Here's what I mean by that. The H1, the H2, and the H3, those are going to be keyways. Literally. Keyways that will fit different locks. That means that the H1 will not go into the H2, will not go into the H3. The H2 will not go in the H1, will not go in the H3, and so on. The H12 and the H23, those are not keyways. Those are key blanks only. which means the H12 will enter the H1 and the H2. The H23 will enter the H2 and the H3. I'm laughing because H1, 2 will go in the H1 and the H2. Okay. The H123 will pass all three of those keyways. So there are three keyways shown, the root, and then there are three multi-section blanks. The H12, the H23, the H123. Those are key blanks only. And what they've basically done is modified the keyway itself on the blank so that it will enter the cylinder, bypassing the wards on the inside of the broaching of the cylinder plug. Okay. Now, a couple of practical applications for this. First, a large practical application. We already talked about tens of thousands of changes, 78,000 possible changes. I'm not a locksmith, but presuming my math is correct. You could take that H1, that H2, and that H3, use the same bidding list of 78,000 possible theoretical changes. You know, you'd have to remove some of them because you wouldn't use some of those changes. And Hager states that they'll go to a 9 max on adjacency. That may or may not apply, but nonetheless. Imagine if you could use that master bidding list. Let's say if you drew up 1,000 changes. You were a Big Ten university, you had a dorm room, and you literally needed 1,000 changes. No problem. Let's go bigger. Let's say that you realistically had a structure that was 30,000 changes. Not unheard of. Not impossible. By the time that you have all of your usable changes out of a theoretical system, you will bump into a finite end of the line with developing more changes. You might have special features that are happening on the cylinders that significantly reduce the amount of changes. You might have a need for master keys that will reduce the amount of potential changes. So let's say that your usable amount of changes might be 5,000. You could have an application where 5,000 isn't enough. Here's what you could do. Take that same bidding list, order everything else in an H2 keyway. Now, your biddings are the same, but who cares? This key will not enter any of these cylinders. This key will not enter any of these cylinders at all. So the multiplex system is a way by which to significantly expand your capability to handle change key requirements in terms of quantity based on these different keyways. You can literally reuse your bidding list, different keyway. So what do? Well, you give that one facility all H1, you give this one all H2, but the maintenance people carry around that H12. They don't care if it's an H12. They go to all the doors. That's where that multiplex system sits into. Okay. A more practical use for this system could be this. There's an example that I use all the time. You have a home, you have a family, a couple of children. You have a front on your house, a front door, a side door, and a back door. Great. You have a basement door. Perfect. You have a garage, a detached garage. It's got its own door. Okay, great. You have an H1 that works on your house, your front door, your back door, your side door, your basement door. You can come and go. Your children have the keys to the house, the whole 9 yards. However, the landscaper needs a key to get in your garage because once a week he's going to come in and take out your lawnmower or whatever he's going to do. Okay, super. Give him an H2. Install on that door an H2 key, lock and deadbolt, whatever. Give him the H2. He can go to the garage. His key can't go to your house because it won't even enter the cylinder. You and your family walk around with an H12. You could then increase the possibility on what's happening here as well, in the sense that your garage, your basement door, maybe now it's a 3-flat. A 3-flat would be a great example. H1, H2, H3, you've got 3 tenants, you're the landlord. H1, H2, H3 locks on those 3 doors. You walk around with an H123, you go everywhere, including the common front door as well. So the ability of a multiplex system is super crucial because it does allow you not only that ability to have a key, a multi-section key, move in different directions, but it does allow you to replicate that bidding list, copying it completely and moving forward. Does a multiplex system ever involve itself in most of our lives? Absolutely not. There's no chance. But if you work at a school district and you might be in administration there, and all you know is you've got a key that says restricted on it, you have no idea what's happening behind the background. There's very likely a multiplex system in play there. If it's restricted, you're not going to have access to a key structure like this because it's restricted. But the behind the scenes could be operating at that sort of level. All right, let's move on. Servicing H series small format interchangeable core is similar to servicing other what they call legacy SFIC, Best, Arrow, Falcon. Legacy SFIC is 150 thousandths spacing. Hager is 140 thousandths. That's where they fit that 7-pin in. That means you can use legacy SFIC pin kit for H series cores. Okay. So that's good to know. So you can use legacy SFIC kits for pinning Hager cores. Not Hager interchangeable cores. Don't think that way. A Hager core. There's no differentiation. You cannot use legacy capping presses for Hager cores, and you would need to buy a Hager capping tool for doing that sort of work. A capping press is after you've pinned an interchangeable core cylinder. Depending on the system, there could be a brass slide cap, or there could be individual round caps on top of each of the chambers where you put it in your fixture, you pull the vise handle down, and it seats those caps. You cannot use that. Why? Because the spacing is different. 150 thousandths versus 140 thousandths. Hager is closer together. The other very important thing to know is that Hager biddings are written bow to tip. Bow to tip. Small format, legacy small format is always tip to bow. Other manufacturers' systems are defined per the system. Corbin Russwin, there's a system that does it, most of it does it bow to tip. They have some legacy stuff that's tip to bow. You have to be familiar with how that system works in order to be able to know when you look at a bidding, where are you starting from? Bow to tip, tip to bow. Okay. Now, Hager H-Series for conventional cylinder users, the H-Series conventional cylinder is similar to servicing legacy cylinders. Except that Hager cylinders use 108 thousandths diameter pin, while legacy products use 115,000 pin. Okay? You cannot use a universal pin kit for Hager H-Series cylinders. Hager offers a pin kit for doing just their stuff, for both conventional and small format, and that you do have to buy their pins individually. So while the structure of your key is going to be compatible for small format Hager, for Hager's interchangeable core and Hager's conventional core, you will need to pin them differently. You can use your existing bench tools and followers. Hager H-Series use the most common 0.500 inch diameter for the plug follower, the plug diameter. That's really important. That's going to be a theoretical reference from the bottom of the root to the top of the blade. Other key systems, 0.5 inch is most common, but that doesn't mean that that's everywhere. It's because it certainly is not. Corbin Russwin is certainly not 0.5 across the board. There are 7 pins in the Hager cylinder instead of the 5 or 6 found in most legacy cylinders. So that's where I got into with a locksmith who called me and said, they got to be 6-pin cylinders. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, shouldn't be a problem. I called Hager, and that's where, it was really explained to me, where it's all 7-pin, meaning the amount of real estate that we have packed into the blade length will accommodate 7-pin. Our system is 7-pin. If you are asking for H1, that means that you are going to get key blanks that can handle a 7-pin. Are you only pinning them 6? Okay, super duper. But there's only one key blank. Moving on to page 4 gives you an overview of their cylinders. What's interesting about Hager that I don't get into very much are the European style profile cylinders is what they're called. Profile, that's the term. Very occasionally we get personally involved with that when someone wants to key their house to their swinging or sliding doors that came from a residential swinging or sliding door manufacturer that has profile cylinders. It is nice that they will be able to give you that same keyway. That's not unheard of. You can certainly get profile cylinders in a C keyway, and technically you can get them in about 25 other keyways as well. Not necessarily easily can you get them, but you can. Hager has an offering of Euro-type hardware. That is, some of it, most of it, I would think, is not available easily, quickly here in the United States. But they do have, because Hager has a global footprint, they have Euro-style stuff, so that European format cylinder is the standard when it comes to places outside of the United States. I've been to Greece. That's the cylinder that they have everywhere. I think American locksmiths will argue, and I would agree with that because I've seen it personally. You take that cylinder and you install it upside down where the Bible of the cylinder, the Bible is the part of the cylinder that holds the springs and the driver pins. Those springs, because you've inverted the Bible, now it's to the bottom. After years, those springs will fatigue. And I have witnessed that the weight of the pin and the fatiguing of the spring will now prevent my key from working. But if I take that profile cylinder and I turn it up, right side up for us, it works fine. Okay, so that would be a downside of European or profile cylinders, but that's not this conversation. Moving to page 5, Hager Keyway field keying configurations. You can order stuff uncombinated. Uncombinated is a fancy way of saying you're going to get the cylinder plug only. There's going to be no springs. There's going to be no pins. There's going to be no keys, no key blanks. They are top-loaded cylinders for their small format, and Euro profile are available uncombinated. Top-loaded means that you're not going to use a plug follower and push the plug out. You're going to have a total built unit, and you fill those chambers from the top. You top-load them. Okay. These cylinders come without pins, springs, caps, set screws, etc., etc. Nothing comes with an uncombinated cylinder, only the cylinder. You can get them that way. A lot of people want them that way because you're going to key it into your system. Okay, you can have Hager do the keying work as well, but that may not be what your situation is. You might be working in a locksmith scenario and you're going to key those cylinders up for your client because that's what you do. You can also order them zero-bitted. Conventionally loaded cylinders, rim, mortise, key and knob, or lever, are available zero-bitted. These cylinders are operated by a key blank and come from the factory with 2 blanks. Only rim, mortise, and key and knob lever cylinders are available in this configuration. Other cylinders are not available zero-bitted. So what that means is Euro profile cylinders and small format cannot be ordered zero-bitted. Zero-bitted is literally the cylinder is going to work perfectly. It'll have pins, drivers, set up, ready to roll. Except that the key cut is a 0-bit. There's no cuts on it. Although a 0-bit technically does give you a cut. Let's test that, right? Let's jump ahead a little bit, just because we have to jump at some point. A 0-bit gives you a root depth. I'm looking on page 7. A 0-bit gives you a root depth of 0.318. A root depth is the root of the key to the root of the cut. A 0-bit is 0. If that's true, what they said about a 0-bit being a blank, my caliper should tell me that that's 0.318 or really close to it. Let's test it. Not accounting for the incredibly small amount of angle that I'm holding the key at, and whatever small amount of finish is on the top of this. My caliper is calibrated perfectly. 0.323. So that's 5/10,000ths of an inch off. So I would argue that that's exactly correct. You are not going to have any cuts on this at all. They would not take off 5/10,000ths of an inch to put a cut there. You're going to have a cylinder that's going to have nothing other than 0 pins across the board, and it's going to come with 2 key blanks. Now that's really handy because you order up 30 locks from Hager and you know your guy's going to want you to key them, however he wants them keyed. Well, since you're going to order the locks, order them all zero bitted. There is most likely no cost change at all, and I would be actually surprised if there was, to a zero bitted. And then the advantage for you and your client, for that matter, is that you're going to get all blanks, where you can then cut keys. So you'll take the cylinder. You obviously have, you could take one key, cut your master, take a key from another lock, and then another, cut your changes. Take your blank, disassemble the cylinder, dump your 1-pins, combinate the cylinder as it is necessary. Now you're ready to go. The point of the matter is you've not wasted any key blanks. You don't then have a bucket that you continue to fill with cut Hager random keys that you don't need, because pulling a master key system out of a shoebox, as it was called once upon a time, will guarantee you key interchange. Okay, so that is true, 0.318. Back to page 5. Construction master keying. Okay, great. Construction master keying is a method of master keying, of making a master key system temporarily to operate a cylinder. Usually during building construction, but not necessarily. You could have a sleeper, and we'll talk about that. When the building is ready to hand over to the client, the temporary master, called the construction master, is disabled by turning one of the permanent keys in the cylinder. Construction master key systems can be set so that all permanent keys disable the construction master, or only a specific key or keys. Sure. The factory default is disabling by any permanent key. Okay. Construction master keying is a form of master keying. It really is. And it is only used with master keyed cylinders. It is not possible to construction key, to order construction master keyed on non-master keyed products. What they said there was, don't call the factory and say, I want 10 cylinders all keyed alike and construction master them. That doesn't work. That's you know, you have to have 2 levels of keying at a minimum to provide construction keying, because construction keying is going to occupy a specific level of the key hierarchy of a cylinder. Hager uses, back up, construction master keying is not available for interchangeable core products. That's a limitation of the physical hardware itself. Please see the catalog for temporary construction cores, which are the small format interchangeable core equivalent to construction keying. What does that mean? That means that in an interchangeable core, you cannot prep the cylinder itself, the core itself, to receive the pieces necessary to create the environment of a construction master keyed system. If you need to have construction master keying occur on a small format, here's what you do. You order all your locks with construction cores, however many changes you need. Generally, they'll all be keyed alike. You will literally have all your locks with construction cores. You'll have them all keyed alike. You'll have a control key. When it's time to turn the building over, disallowing construction personnel from accessing, you take the control key, remove the construction cores, physically remove them, then insert the permanent cores. That's how you do that. And that's, in fact, the only way to do it on small format for Hager. Okay, now, moving forward. Construction master keying by Hager in conventional cylinders is what's called the lost ball method. A very simple system. You can easily search lost ball construction keying, and you'll find, I'm sure, tons of information on it. In essence, what happens is this. I'll give a generic, and then we'll go over Hager's thing. You have here's what you have when you have a lost ball system. Here's a summary of construction master keying. Lost ball method. Okay, and we're probably going to fine-tune this a little bit after I go read on further, which I've not read yet. But here is some information. CMK. Just imagine that we've got a 5-pin cylinder, and the cuts on the CMK are all 5s. Doesn't matter what they are. You wouldn't have that, but let's just say it's all 5s. Because we really only care about one chamber anyway. Your change key, or your permanent key, is 555 5553. Okay? In order to pin that cylinder, you're going to have a 5 bottom pin on chambers 1 through 6. You're going to have a 3 bottom pin on chamber 7 with a ball in chamber 7 on top. The thickness of the ball, and I don't know that it is, but for example purposes, is equal to the thickness of a 2 master pin, master wafer, whatever you call it. Okay. Construction master key is cut deeper. Every time you put that master key in, it needs a 5 in every position to satisfy the shear line requirement. You've got 5 pins, 1 through 6. The 7th chamber is a 3 bottom pin with a 2 master, which is a ball. It literally is a tiny ball bearing. Okay. That's going to work every time. That key is going to be satisfied. I want to disable all people who carry that 5 construction master key. I want to disable that. I'm going to insert my permanent key. It's going to need a 3 in the 7th chamber. I've got a 3 bottom pin. Where does the ball go? It goes up into the Bible, up into the top of the cylinder. My key is going to work just super perfect. However, in the cylinder plug itself, I'm going to make a crude drawing here, another crude drawing. Here's my cylinder. I've got 7 pins looking down at the cylinder. That little solid dot that's there. When I insert my permanent that has a 3 in the 7th chamber, the ball goes up. When I put that in and I turn it, the ball is under spring tension. And as soon as the ball hits that dimple that's been drilled in the cylinder plug itself, it's going to fall down and it's going to stay there forever. You cannot reset that master keying without disassembling the cylinder and putting the ball back in the 7th chamber. I've had customers, hey Rich, I got to come over. I put the permanent key in by mistake on this house. I need you to reset the locks. Yeah, you got to take the locks apart, remove the ball from the plug. Now you can also have that same system where the receptacle is up in the cylinder plug itself, in the cylinder housing. And then in that case, I think your bitting's going to be reversed, but the concept is the same. You only need one chamber to disallow a key from working. You only need one chamber. The amount of force it would take to shear a pin is far greater than what it would take to shear the head of the key blank off. But that's the idea of lost ball. Hager uses the lost ball method of construction keying. Construction key capture holes are drilled in the cylinders at the time of order. You have to specify that. And if you want to do lost ball in your shop, just be sure to make sure the plugs are drilled for lost ball. It is possible to order 0-bitted cylinders with capture holes for field construction keying, but cylinders are not stocked that way and they need to be drilled to order. Hager varies the location of the construction ball and in some cases may use more than one ball in a cylinder. Okay, you only need one, and it doesn't really matter where the holes are in the plug, but you sure can't cut keys until you know that location, because that's the chamber where you're going to be off the thickness of the ball. Construction keying must be designed into a system at its inception. It is not always possible to add a construction master key to an existing key system. That's because the plugs aren't drilled across the board every time. I've seen lots of cylinders. I've done lots of construction keying with lost ball method, and there will be a whole crop for a year of certain locks that are all drilled for construction for lost ball. And then you stop seeing them. And then they come back, and then they're different. And then you've got different series of locks from a single manufacturer that use different cylinders, and they're not all drilled. The point being, you must specify that at the time of order, or you can count on not being able to construction key the stuff. So just specify it. which tells me you're going to wait a lead time, which maybe just have the factory do your construction keying anyway. Moving on to page 6, random keying. Common random keyed combinations are keyed differently, keyed alike in pairs, Ka2, Ka4, keyed alike in groups of 4. The factory keeps no records of random key combinations. Hager random key combinations use cuts 3 through 9 only. Okay. You can sure, if they're all pinned to 7, you can easily determine how many possible keys there are. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 7 times 7 to the 7th power is the number of possible theoretical changes, theoretical possibilities. And I'm sure that they would have, it doesn't violate MACS, so you can do it, MACS. Cylinder marking. Hager keyed master cylinders are marked in removable ink with the keying configuration. ANSI A156.28. I don't know what that document is off the top of my head. I would imagine it's a document that governs the definitions of the SKC system, standard key coding system. A156.28. That's an ANSI standard. ANSI A156.28. Yeah, recommended practices for mechanical keying is what that is titled. Recommended practices for mechanical key systems. That is literally an ANSI standard, American National Standards Institute, the .28 standard of the A156 series that provides recommended practice and intended for building owners, security professionals, and others designing, implementing, maintaining secure key systems, minimize legal liability by providing industry-proven guidelines. It covers system design to provide design criteria to establish and maintain a secure keying system. The purpose of the document is to maintain guidelines for the Essential Keying Conference, establish good practices for effective key management, and give building owners the ability to extend the life of keying systems to meet future demands. That is a document that you would have to purchase from ANSI. And if you are in the industry, I'm sure it'd be well worth the cost. Although the standard key coding system is, you can find documentation online to help you do that as well. Cylinder marking. Hager cylinders are marked in removable ink according to the SKC, the A156.28. Other marking arrangements are possible. You might want blind codes, meaning you might want to call something a randomized code, a randomized identifier, that with the with a reference document, be able to convert it to a bidding or maybe a location, things of that nature. You can be as creative as you like with this cryptography sort of idea. Keys. Hager has one type of key. It's a 7-pin that fits everything. Nothing is tip-stopped. Key marking. They can obviously engrave keys in the factory. At the factory, they can stamp it with anything that, not anything, but they can stamp it. Key cutting. Max. There is no system-wide forbidden adjacencies. They recommend a maximum adjacent cut specification of 8 for optimum performance with high use keys. Factory master key systems generally observe a max of 8, but on larger systems they'll go to a 9. Okay, so what is this max? A max is very simply stated as adjacent. The terms maximum, adjacent, and cut. Adjacent. 2 keys that are together. Okay. Bear with me. Just focus on adjacent, please. This is not going to get drawing of the year. Here's a key. I've got 3 cuts here. Let's call it a 3, 1, 7. What if I took that 1 and turned it into a, well, forgive me, let's start over. Let's call this 1, 0, 9. The concept of maximum adjacent cut specification is if I were to take this 0 cut and turn it into a 9, the depth of that cut and the width of the cutter that creates the cut in the key blank can give me a scenario by which I have partially obliterated with that 9 cut its adjacent cut. So that 1 cut, I've partially obliterated it by making that deep second cut. My drawing is naturally horrible, but I assure you, because I've done it, and I've looked at the key and said, that doesn't look right. And then many years ago, I investigated what my problem was, and it was I had violated the max. There's a system, other manufacturers do not have a max of 8 or 9. They have a much smaller max, like 6. So if you put a 1 cut next to an 8 cut or a 9 cut, you are going to partially obliterate by the amount of the width of the cut, whether you're punching it or duplicating it. You're going to obliterate part of the cut so that the root of the cut does no longer exist in a sufficient width so to permit the bottom pin to sit on there properly. The beveled edge of that pin is going to fall down below, and it will stop eventually, but it will not create a flush shear line for you. It won't create a shear line. That's what max is, and it must be observed. Hager really takes a lot of that off, because I think you'd have to go out of your way to violate their max. You know, don't put a 0 next to a 9, and you're not going to have a problem. Don't have a non-cut next to a 9, and you won't have a problem. Key machine. You know, before we move on, the interval is point. You know what? We're going to wait because I'm going to get to that in a moment. Yes, next page. Okay. Key machine. Keys can be cut using the Hager key punch or semi-automatic, manual machines, motorized machines for cutting them. You have to use a Hager prepped punch to cut Hager house keyways. SFIC A3 and A4. Okay, a lot of people don't know what that was, or certainly a time that I didn't know either. The standard interchangeable core, I should say the most common, is what's called an A2 system. That is a reference to the pin stack, the magic number when it comes to not the magic number, that I think applies to something else. The number of a pin stack. And in an A2 system, that number is 23. Your bottom pins, your masters, your build-up pin, your top pin. Well, your build-up pin. An A3 system and an A4 system is still interchangeable core. Nothing changes. Except the number 23 is now 16, I think, on an A3 system. And then it might be 11 on an A4 system. So what that means is when you're pinning this stuff, you have to be using pins and observing the rules of the particular system that you're doing in small format. A2, A3, or A4. The quantity of pins, the number that you have to get to have a healthy, proper operating interchangeable core plug has to be observed. That's the difference between A2, A3, and A4. Otherwise, there's no difference at all. You just the math in your head has to change. Page number 7. Page number 7. Page number 7 of the keying service manual. That's super important, and you're going to see that sort of diagram regardless of whose keying system you're using. Sargent, Best, Corbin material that was discontinued in that no longer was being used in new systems in 1968. Doesn't matter. You're going to see that sort of drawing on everyone's system because it holds some of the cardinal truths, the cardinal rules about keys. You can teach anyone, literally, I think anyone, to cut a key, to manually duplicate a key. It might be a different thing to teach someone to cut it by code or by dimensional requirements, where a caliper is your key gauge. However, that shouldn't be so because there's really nothing technical about this. again, not being a locksmith, so jump in the water's fine. Looking at that page 7, the 0.0125 increment is really important because that's where an even parity, that's where a two-step system applies. A two-step system versus a one-step system. There are many one-step systems. Corbin Russwin, one-step system, a lot of it. And in a lot of instances, a one-step system for me is preferable because you'll get an additional possibility out of every chamber, perhaps. A two-step system means that you must step away from the prior cut in that chamber by 2 steps, by 2. If you've got a 5 cut in the first chamber, don't make that master key or your change key in that first chamber a 4 or a 6. That's a 1 step. If you're at a 5, you got to be either 3 or 7. That's 2. You got to be 2 away. The reason is because that 0.0125 increment, look at the root depth on the right side. We just said 5. That's 0.2555. Add 0.0125 to 0.2555 and you get 0.2680, which is a 4 cut. That's 0.0125 away from each other. The bottom line is this. The thickness of that master wafer is insufficient to work reliably in the cylinder plug in the housing. It is so thin that it will jam the cylinder. It's going to jam the cylinder, guaranteed. I have found in a two-step system that getting below 0.027 is real risky business. Real risky business. You wouldn't dare go, in my opinion, you wouldn't dare go below a two-step system in their 0.0125, which becomes 0.25, right? 0.25. I just said I don't dare go below 0.027. This system would be 0.025. The thickness of the wafer for a number 2 master. That tells me when they've got such a small increment that their machining on their plugs, their housings, must be very good, where they can tolerate 0.025 that thick, 0.025 that thick, without it jamming the cylinder. Look at the root depths. Let's take a detour for a moment. Why is a 4 cut deeper than a 5 cut? 0.268 is bigger than 0.2555. It's a bigger number. Look at a 9, 0.2055. Look at a 9, 0.2, forgive me, 0.2055. That's a 9. I lied. 0.0255. That's a 9. That's a 9 cut. That's a root depth 9 cut. Why would a 1 cut be 0.2055? That's a 9 root cut. If I go to a 1, a 0.3055, it's bigger. That's because these are root depths, defined as, and it's not shown on the drawing. It would be nice if they had taken a bit of space and defined that. The root of the key blank is the bottom of the blank. That's the root. This root seems to be square. Not every key blank is square on the bottom. Corbin Russwin has some radius stuff, I know. I happen to have just read their service manual not too long ago. That's why Corbin Russwin keeps coming into the conversation. If you were to measure the root of the key to the bottom of any cut, that's the root depth. You would need a caliper to do that. That's why I was able to say my root depth of a 0 cut is 0.318. Well, when I measure my root to the top of my blade, I get 0.322 is what I had said. So it's 4 thousandths off. Now imagine if there was a 9 cut in here. Now all of a sudden my caliper is going to go from the root to the bottom of the 9 cut, right in the plateaued area. That's why the number is smaller. Okay, so you have to think about it differently also in the sense, and not, this is not Hager specific, but if I were to have a key and my caliper, it's okay that there are no biddings on there. It doesn't matter. I'm going to measure it, and I'm going to record that. And then I want to record my spacing. I want to record my stop to first cut space. And then I can, with a file and a caliper, I can duplicate that key. Not necessarily that I can, because I'm not a locksmith. But I could use machinery to duplicate it. That I can for sure do. I have a code cutting machine that doesn't care about system. What's the shoulder to the first? What's the depth? Great. Cut it. What's your center to center spacing? Cut them. It doesn't matter. That's why that chart is so important, because to the locksmith, it tells you everything you need to know about the Hager system. But also, it tells you the angle of the cutter. For sure, you're going to be cutting keys on machines that aren't Hager. You got to have a 90-degree cutter, and you have to know the plateau width is .048. If you're using a cutter that has a wider or a narrower degree of angle, the key may work, probably won't. You might find that it doesn't work, but if you adjust it a little bit deeper, it will work, etc. Or if you take your code machine by your HPC machine and you rock that x-axis this way a little bit and this way a little bit, it might work. But you need to have your physical equipment set up to be completely compatible with the physical requirements of that chart on page 7. The important thing with cutting keys by code is knowing the stop to first cut, and it's always center line. Shoulder stop system. Hager is not tip stopped. Shoulder to the first cut, 0.2158. Then you'll notice that their center spacing, they don't tell you that their center spacing is the same, but it is. If you took your 7 spacing and subtracted your 6 spacing, your 1.0567, and subtracted 0.9166, you'll have a number that is 0.140, which is what they said it would be. If you take 0.9166 and subtract 0.140, plus or minus the spacing tolerance, you're going to have 0.7764. You can do the math and say, oh, the spacing is consistent. And that's because it has to be, because all your plugs are drilled to that size. Spacing is measured from the top shoulder. That's called a shoulder stop, is what it's called. Bottom shoulder is offset 0.090. Okay, well, that's good to know. You might, for some reason, need to know that. .090 dimension, that's there. You might be gauging something from the tip and then need to do the math, I suppose. If you do locksmithing, a caliper is going to come really in handy. Bottom shoulder offset, 0.090. Bear with me 1 minute. I'm entertaining myself with an investigation of the location of that tip stop. It's awfully hard to measure that with your caliper. Yeah, the bottom shoulder is offset 0.090 inch. I can't think of a reason why that's going to apply to what you're doing. So you'll be on your own for that. If you find a relevant application for that information, let me know. Page 8 gets into all of the pins, their sizes that you would require. Unfortunately, they don't give you part numbers there. They should. It'd be nice to have an extra column for a part number. Full-size bottom pins, small format bottom pins, then your master or build-up pins. Your page 10, pardon me, page 9, I'm sure gives a layout, a topography of their pin kit. Okay, you can see where everything goes. Page 10 gets into the different parts, and now you'll have your part numbers that are there, and the construction ball is listed there. Interesting, the ball is a 6 increment. My example talked about it being equal to a 2 master pin thickness, a 0.025. This is a 0.6. So you're going to need to have, you know, a key cut to 2 and a key cut to 6. And that 6, you know, is going to be, a key cut to 2 and a key cut to 8. To have that 6, a 2 bottom pin and then an 8 ball. That's pretty huge. Well, yeah, it's 0.075, so it sounds huge. It's not. It's really not that big. Okay. If you're going to get into doing Hager stuff and you're going to do their Hager keyways, I don't see any way around not having a pinning kit. And will you do any construction keying? I suppose you could. You know, it's an interesting way to be able to disable a key should you need. You know, use your imagination as to why you might do that, I suppose. More cylinder parts, getting down into page 11. Again, if you're doing Hager stuff, you're going to want these parts laying around. Eventually, you're going to lose one. Page 12 gets into the tools and accessories. The capping block, the ejector pin tool that's there, the plug follower, tweezers if you're prone to use tweezers. I do very infrequently. Their blue punch is there, which is ProLock. I'm sure ProLock is the manufacturer of that blue punch. I don't know. Well, there are other people who make punches. That certainly looks like a ProLock blue punch, which I own one. Great tool. Cap saver press. If I was doing individually capped, I'd probably have that tool, but they're really expensive. For doing Hager, you're going to need it, in my opinion, to save you the time of tapping each of the individual caps down. Special pinning note on page 13. When rekeying conventional cylinders, always check the top pin chambers and remove any unnecessary master pins. That is incredibly important. Customer walks in, hey, rekey this cylinder. Here's the new key I want you to put it to. Okay, give me the old key. Boom. Old key, dump those pins. New key goes in, pin up the plug, put it back together, done. Is it possible that there are any other incidental keys that will work that? Yes. How is that possible? You didn't check to see if there are any master pins in the Bible of the cylinder. One time, 25 plus years ago, a client came back. He was angry. This one key from over here worked this cylinder. And I says, well, I keyed it to the key that you gave me. Yeah, but this other key works it. And then I thought, and I realized, because I had seen other people do it, they would take that plug follower and they would test and check each chamber and dump out any master pins. And I said to the client, I didn't check for master pins. That's my mistake. Evacuated all the master pins, problem solved. You have to check for master pins all the time. Not because it's going to happen, but because it can happen. And I can tell you that one time in my life, it did happen. Cleaning and lubricating, I'll leave that to you to read and review. Page 14, a keying schedule. If you're going to go to a keying meeting, A keying meeting would be great, and it would be really, keying meetings are best conducted when you are on a full night of sleep, because you can start out with it being organized. And when I conduct a keying meeting, I generally try to keep it within logical blocks. I've got outside doors, I've got inside doors. And the slippery slope that I would slide down sometimes would, I would be telling someone, okay, what you're telling me is that it's just going to work like this. No, I don't want it to work that way. And then they would say in their own words what I had just said. The point of the keying meeting is you need to be, your bedside manner needs to be excellent, because people will quickly get confused, not confused, people will get apprehensive, because a keying meeting, in my experience, is where you may be perceived as someone who has the authority to disallow people from their key going somewhere. They think because you're doing the key work, you can make it so their key won't work. So you just have to be able to put it into the logical structure of what needs to be done, eliminate any requests that are not necessary and legitimate, go to the stakeholder if you have to, and keep it as simple as possible, meaning the quantity of keys operating a cylinder based on our initial example of key interchange. Unintentional keys working cylinders. I don't know if you can record a keying meeting, but that might be nice in terms of being able to draw on what someone said. Keying meetings are also, what's the structure of the building? If it's a manufacturing facility, if it's a 25,000 square foot building and they have punch presses in there and there are piece parts made, it's pretty simple. Your top level categories are going to be the exterior doors. You're going to have management. And maybe the CEO can be different. You can have all your managers on the same key. You might have accounting, payroll, human resources separate. They may be completely on their own, where only the grandmaster will work. You'll then have facilities within the manufacturing plant, floor supervisors. Those keys are probably all going to be the same. There's no need to keep upper level management out of there, but there's no reason to keep the AM shift, shift 1 from going in the door where shift 2 and 3 can go in. That doesn't make sense. You'll have the same kind of key for that. Distill it down to the essence of what it has to be, and that will permit you to have a tighter system overall. But do be flexible to listen, try to digest, ask questions, make them clarify it, have people say it so that they can hear themselves saying it, and don't challenge people directly. Just find a way to elegantly challenge without making people feel apprehensive, or making people feel as if they're being questioned, or making people feel as if what they're asking for is not legitimate. Keys are a psychological thing, a subconscious thing, so be mindful of that. That takes us to the end of the catalog. I'm not a locksmith. I know a little bit about this stuff. I believe I'm on the mark with pretty much everything. About Hager in particular, my family's been selling Hager since the 1970s. There are times when I love Hager. There are times when I really love Hager. There are times when not so much. But that's anywhere you go with any company you deal with. What I find with Hager, though, to be true is they have a loyal client base. The end user who buys into the Hager system, they are staying with Hager. Don't talk to them about any other system. And I'm not advocating that you should. But there's a loyalty that's built in there, and somehow, and I haven't been able to put my finger on it, but somehow that exists. And I would like to think it's a confluence that Hager puts out a good product at a good price on a good lead time by people who know the business. I have my particular problems with Hager. But overall, Hager is a name that continues to grow. It's not just Hager Hinge anymore, and hasn't been for a real long time. The advantage to the distributor like me, how we were sold on increasing our footprint of Hager purchases was I remember the salesman here in southern Florida where I live. He's retired, and he's a legend in the world of sales reps. At least he is to me. Hey, one PO, I'm going to be able to ship you your hinges, your weather stripping, your locks, your closers, your exit devices, your trim and auxiliary hardware, your push and pull plates, sliding door stuff, all that stuff. Your door closers, even though that wasn't the case back then, but you could get your weather stripping, your trim and auxiliary, and your hinges all from one guy. One PO. You're going to be hitting minimum prepaid shipping charges all the time. So from the distributor's perspective, wow, I like that. Makes my life easier. What's the quality like? It's good quality. Why not use Hager? It's a name people know. Hager continues to build this footprint. And they do, one thing I like to say is they've been selling hardware since Polk was president. I mean, I think literally since Polk was president. And they continue to increase their footprint in the industry. They do everything but the door and frame itself. And I'm actually surprised that they're not doing the door and frame itself. I think they've decided that there's no money in it. And their energies are better spent elsewhere in the door hardware industry. But they're a name that I will continue to use and consider on projects. Generally what I'll find is much of what they bring in from overseas, they generally have a huge amount of it. So you can call them up and say, I need 50 tracks, 9801 tracks. I need, 30 of them 12 foot long. I need some 8-footers. I need some 16-footers. Ready to go. Not ready to go. They need normal lead time, but it's there. Kind of ready to go. Any questions on Hager King system, or if I've made any mistakes, please feel free to point those out to me. I'd love to be able to help you dive into and deepen your understanding of Hager King systems. My name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. Thank you very much.